Hello, my friends. Welcome to Marvel Mayhem, the series where I review every Marvel creation for television or the big screen and ask the simple question, is it worth watching? And today we're going to take a look at a 1988 made for television movie called Return of the Incredible Hulk, starring Bill Bixby as not as the Incredible Hulk. He's not the Incredible Hulk. As Doctor David Banner, not Bruce Banner. They changed that just because this is a kind of sequel of sorts to the television series, and they changed the name in the television series because they didn't want it to be too much like a comic book. And because of Stan Lee, they thought alliterative names like Bruce Banner, Peter Parker were clearly comic book character names. So they changed it to David Banner. So it stars him as David Banner, Bill Bixby, and it stars Lou Ferrigno as the Incredible Hulk. Maybe somebody can correct me in the comments if I am mispronouncing his name, but he is an iconic kind of actor as well for the Bixby verse, I'll call it, of the Incredible Hulk. So why is it the Bixby verse? Because you have the Incredible Hulk series, and then you have a series of movies that came after for various reasons. So this particular one, the one that came out in 1988, is designed to be a pilot for a series that they never made about Thor and David Blake, I guess his name is. So, yeah. Hopefully on the verge of curing his Hulk condition, Banner meets his colleague, Don Blake, who is mystically linked to a Viking warrior named Thor. I mentioned who Bixby plays and who Ferrigno plays, and Jack Colvin is starring as Jack McGee. Steve Levitt is Donald Blake, and Eric Allen Kramer plays Thor. So, as I said, it was supposed to be a pilot for a Thor series. But when you think about Thor, there's like a lot of changes from the MCU version of Thor. First of all, Thor still has... It's not really a secret identity because they're literally two different people. But in Marvel Comics, I'm not sure if this is true now, but so basically, there was a guy named, I just said his name, Donald Blake, who Odin used to be a vessel for Thor on Earth. So basically, it was sort of like a secret identity kind of thing, that Thor was the superhero with superpowers and Donald Blake was like the normal guy. I'm not sure that they do that anymore. And I think maybe, I don't know, maybe somebody in Marvel, when they were making the Iron Man series, thought having secret identities was stupid. So Tony Stark came out and said, "I'm Iron Man," and then they were like, "Okay, we can't have any secret identities anymore," so they killed off Blake. Although I don't think that's why they killed off Blake. They just probably didn't want to have two actors playing that character. Yeah, but anyway, back to the series. Back to this movie, not series. So it starts with the same introduction to the movie as to the television show. And this movie came out in 1988, and I believe the television show finished in 1984. So probably the show still would have been in syndication in 1988. So it kind of makes it really confusing. Like, is this something new? Is this something different? And if it's not that different, then why not just make this, like, why not do another season of The Incredible Hulk? Doesn't make much sense. Um, so we start with kind of like a dream or a vision that Banner is having. Um, so he has this vision of him turning into the Hulk, which is something that does happen in the this movie later. But he sees the Hulk. How can he and the Hulk in his dream in his vision looks exactly like the Hulk really looks like. So David Banner has never seen the Hulk because when David Banner is the Hulk, he's not thinking in the way that he's gonna like, oh, and maybe I should take a picture for David to show him what he looks like when he's the Hulk. He doesn't know what the Hulk looks like, so that's a little bit of a plot hole. Um, David has a girlfriend in this one, and this is kind of really sad that I'm gonna say this right now. So in this movie, the movie starts with David Banner having a good life for the first, so he hasn't become the Hulk in 2 years. He has a girlfriend who loves him. He has a job in an interesting company to work for, and he is on the verge of curing his condition because he's invented this machine called the gamma refractor, I don't know, some machine that's going to take the gamma rays out of him so he's no longer the Hulk. um yeah, so he has a girlfriend who works with him at this company, and she mentions the monster and David and the audience are going, "Oh no, is she talking about the big green guy?" And she's like, "Oh no, 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 I mean like the self-destructive behavior you mentioned in the past." And he's like, "Oh yes, the self-destructive behavior, completely gone now." Um, so yeah, all right, I didn't finish my thought before. So he has this really great life, and it's ruined because they want to make a Thor television series, right? Like, how ridiculous is that? Like, let's ruin the happy ending of this character just so we can introduce Thor. Like, it's dumb. It's so dumb and a bit sad. The characters have great 1980s hair. Bixby has, I what can only be called like a comb back. It's not like a comb over, it's a comb back. And the lead actress, she doesn't have like wild and crazy 80s hair, but if you look at it, it's like incredibly sculpted and detailed. So she probably had to spend like an hour or two on that hair to make it look so architectural. Um, I think that in this part of the movie, it seems to be the Hulkness of Banner's situation seems to be a metaphor for alcoholism because it's something that he struggled with. It's something that's destroyed his career and his relationships, and he feels like he can't have, any lasting connection with anybody because of his alcoholism nor his Hulkness. So it's a good metaphor. I think it makes a lot of sense at this particular moment. So, yeah, as I mentioned before, he invents this gamma ray refractor thing that's going to help him cure himself. But I have two thoughts about that. First thought is that he has been traumatized by having this experience of being the Hulk. And I think that the thing that Marvel doesn't do very well with the Hulk right now, like they just think it's like a funny way to be destructive or whatever. But the thing that they don't do very well is show you that the Hulk is a tragedy for the person who is the Hulk, right? Because Banner can't have any normal relationships because of this. So he became the Hulk through his own sort of like scientific hubris. Tested the drug on himself. I mean, it wasn't really a drug, but he tested his hypothesis on himself, and there was like a small mistake that led to these horrible consequences for him for the rest of his life. So you'd think that he would have some trauma connected to gamma ray research, but no, he's completely happy kind of doing that. The other thing that I'd like to mention is it doesn't make any sense that he is doing this gamma ray research, because in the series he's not a physicist, right? Bruce Banner is a physicist. David Banner is a psychiatrist, right? Kind of important distinction in different scientific fields. So it's kind of a little bit of a hand-wavy thing to say, oh yes, we'll bring him back and he'll be this gamma ray scientist. And it's also, I mean, Bixby directed this, and I think that he was kind of the driving factor towards making this a thing. And I think he actually owned the rights on for the Incredible Hulk on television at this time. So you kind of can blame him for that, actually. It's not the biggest thing, but it's kind of odd. His boss also has a comb back. I'm gonna make that a thing, comb backs. And it's also kind of great to see really advanced technology for 1988, like a CD-ROM, and it's completely obsolete now, but you can see Banner carefully putting it in the case and carefully taking it out, because probably at the time it was pretty expensive. Yeah, so I think that I understand why these pilots failed. So there is a pilot, this one, which is a pilot for a potential Thor series, and then there's going to be one in 1989, I believe, called The Trial of the Incredible Hulk, which is a pilot series. It's a pilot for a potential Daredevil series, and they both failed because, and I think that the reason the series wasn't picked up is because they didn't really make the universe of those characters seem unique enough to have a television show. And I think that if you were like a TV producer, you would think, okay, so the Thor series is just going to be like a spin-off of Hulk because it was in Hulk. So we have to make it like the Hulk world. But I mean, they're all Marvel characters, right? But when I think about Thor, I don't have the same kind of world view as I do with the Hulk. And Daredevil also, completely different world than the one that's being inhabited by the Hulk. So I can see why that failed. But on the other hand, I can see why the people behind these productions would have used the Incredible Hulk, because it was so popular. These movies were highly rated when they came out. So kind of makes sense, but I can also see why it didn't work. So Steve Levitt, who plays Donald Blake, he has like a bit of charm as well, but there's a scene where he's doing this exposition, and it's really hard to do exposition well because generally people in real life, they don't give you paragraphs of exposition. It's more like a conversation that you have, when you talk about other things, and it lasts like 2 minutes maybe, depending on who you're talking to and what you're talking about. So, didn't really work here. But he does have a great line where he says, "This is the 80s. I don't know what a good cause is anymore, but Thor does," which is great. And the entrance of Thor goes pretty hard. There's like a theme music, lightning, everything. It was good. It was good. But again, I have to stress that I think they did Banner's character badly here, because basically he's living a good life, then Blake comes, Thor breaks Banner's machine, Banner gets angry, and then he becomes a Hulk, which basically destroys his life. So how did he manage not to get angry in normal moments for the past 2 years? Because was he ever driving? Hopefully not, you know? So that's kind of odd. And Eric Allen Kramer as Thor is also quite funny. He's got some funny lines. I think Thor is generally, obviously, a funny character, and you need to treat him as this force of nature, but also as comedic relief because that's what he is. And he just gets into a fight because he wants to test him, and of course, like in the MCU, he much prefers the Hulk to Banner, because he understands the Hulk better. Then there's a squash scene in slow-mo, and it got me thinking, like, why were the 80s so obsessed with squash? I don't know. Squash and highlight, that, like, bass game where you throw the ball. Really, really weird. So, Banner becomes the Hulk, and he goes on a rampage, and then he goes to his girlfriend's house, and the dog sees him, and the dog doesn't freak out. So at first I thought this was like, oh, because Banner and the Hulk are the same person, which is true, obviously, but I think maybe David, in those 2 years when he says he hasn't been the Hulk, he actually did become the Hulk, and the dog saw that, and the dog was like completely fine with this transformation, which I don't think the dog would be, but that's a different topic. So basically, the plot, such that it is that they try to kidnap Banner because they want this machine that he has, and then they're gonna kidnap his lady to get to Banner. But how do they know anything about Banner, that he has a girlfriend? Because he's a fugitive on the run. I mean, fugitive is maybe a bit of a stretch, but basically he faked his own death so he could escape, because the Hulk would have been wanted for the murder of him and his girlfriend at the time. So he's not posting on Facebook at this time, and there is no Facebook. So how do they know that he has a girlfriend? It's really quite bad. And then there's a kind of a sad shot where Bixby is shown from the side, and you can see wrinkles. So why I bring that up is not to body shame an actor from the 1980s, but to say that this movie, Bixby died, I think he died in 1994, 1995. So about 5 or 6 years after this movie. So it's kind of like sad on the one hand to see him like that, but on the other hand, maybe he really enjoyed this role. Certainly it defined him, it defined his career. Yeah, but back to the movie, it really drags towards the end. It's like an hour and a half, but it feels like 5 hours. Yeah, I mean, it's got interesting parts to it, certainly, but is it worth watching? I'm gonna say no. I give it like a 5 out of 10, but I don't. It's not the worst thing Marvel has ever produced by far. That would have to be Captain America from 1979. But I think it's certainly not something that you should go out and try and watch if you can, like the Doctor Strange pilot from 1978, or the or Red Sonja. Not technically a Marvel movie, but great movie anyway. Both of which I recently reviewed for this channel. So, if you like my reviews, I'm going to ask you a favor. If you listen to what I had to say and you're like, yeah, that's interesting, I like that, please give me a follow, give me a subscription on YouTube, like the video, leave a comment. All of those things help with the algorithm. And another thing you can do, if you are a big fan of the Bixbyverse, like I know you are, you want to listen to my next review of the next installment in the Bixbyverse, which is a little movie from 1989, I believe, called The Trial of the Incredible Hulk. That's a bit of a clickbait title, but I didn't name it that. So you have to watch the movie, watch the video of me talking about the movie to figure out why that's clickbait. All right, talk to you later. Bye.